So a lot of you guys have been asking me to do more hard questions. So today that's exactly what I'm going to do for you. I will be doing a mixed review of tons of different types of questions in both the English and math sections. Make sure to use the timestamps if you're looking for something specific. I just want to remind you that in order to get the most out of this video, you need to try these questions on your own first. So pause the video and try them on your own before you watch my explanation. And if you want to download a free PDF of all the problems that I'm working on, just go ahead and use the link in the description. All right, this one's going to be words in context. So I'm going to read through. As an undergraduate researcher, this Jennifer contributed to a study challenging the accepted view. All right, so we're challenging a view that among prehistoric peoples, female participation in hunting was blank. The research team's review of data from these eras and early burials in the Americas revealed that, in fact, so this should go against whatever this is, as many as half of the hunters in those populations were female. Okay, so half of them being female, we want to go against that because we're challenging that. We have in fact, so I'm going to say something like female participation was lacking, something like that, because half of hunters would not be lacking, so lacking would be the opposite, kind of what I'm looking for. Inevitable, nope. Satisfactory, no, satisfactory is like enough. Negligible. So negligible is definitely lacking. Negligible means such a small amount that it like doesn't even matter. So that would be my answer. And I'm just going to circle it and be done. If you're confident, choose your answer, move on. If you're not 100% confident, make sure to eliminate 3 answers first. Command of evidence. Rejecting the premise that literary magazine Ebony and Topaz should present a unified vision of Black American identity, this guy fostered his contributors' diverse perspectives by promoting their authorial autonomy. Johnson's self-effacement diverged from the editorial stances of these other guys whose decisions for their publications were more blank. Because it says that Johnson's self-effacement diverged, we know that it's going to be different from these other guys. So self-effacement on its own is sort of not trying to like have all the attention on you. And then the sentence before that, it says used his contributors' diverse perspectives. So if we're looking for the opposite of that for these other guys, their decisions would be more, I don't know, like self-centered, or at least what's the opposite of diverse perspectives, or one perspective, something like that. So that'll be my prediction. Then looking at my answer choices, proficient definitely doesn't work there because proficient means you're like effective, good at doing something, not self-centered or from one perspective. Dogmatic I could see working because dogmatic means you are sticking to a dogma, a set of beliefs, and usually it's used in a negative way. Like if you're dogmatic, you just sort of follow the rules of your dogma blindly. Dogma being like a kind of teaching. So that could fit with the one perspective at least, not necessarily the self-centered. C, ambiguous. Ambiguous is just like it's unclear, so that doesn't work. Unpretentious. So self-centered is pretentious. So unpretentious would be the opposite of that. So that would be like the opposite of part of my prediction. So I'll say D is out, and then B is going to have to be my answer. And yeah, that works. So we've got a structure and purpose question here because it's asking about the main purpose of the text. So I like to definitely check out the date and any information they're going to give me up top. Specifically the date because it just sort of prepares me for, either words being used in a way that they aren't normally used or just words being used that I don't know. And it's telling me that Humphrey Davy was a prominent British chemist and inventor. So I'm going to pay attention. That's probably somewhat important since that's the only thing they're mentioning here. All right, we get years ago, this American savant was in London. He observed at an evening party a certain coxcombical fellow. All right, coxcombical, not a super common term. Let's work through this as if we don't know what it means. We're going to try to figure out what it means based on the context, right? As he thought, an absurd ribbon in his lapel, full of smart banter, whisking about to the admiration of as many were disposed to admire. Okay. So based on this, I'm thinking coxcombical is maybe sort of loud, not loud, like literally loud, but personable, maybe like annoyingly personable and friendly. Like he's trying to get people to like him, with the smart banter, trying to get admiration. He's got this really obnoxious ribbon, apparently. So perhaps he's a bit like conceited, full of himself, that sort of thing. Anyway, so then we get great was the savant's disdain. And then remember, the savant is the person who's observing this guy. So now we know this guy is not fond of him. Disdain means he really doesn't like him. But chancing long to find himself in a corner with the jackanapes. I don't know what a jackanapes is, but we know he's calling this guy a jackanape. So maybe it's also like a coxcombical fellow, a jackanapes, an absurd man who's full of himself. That's what I'm going to assume. Got into conversation with him and was somewhat ill prepared for the good sense of him. Okay. So he got into conversation. He was kind of taken aback by how friendly he was, it seems. Oh, it even says thrown aback, but was altogether thrown aback upon subsequently being informed that he was no less a personage than Sir Humphrey Davy. Okay, so the language there's, again, not something we would hear today, but basically saying he was surprised that this is in fact Sir Humphrey Davy, which we know is a prominent British chemist and inventor from the top there. Cool. All right. So main purpose of the text. With fiction, if you're looking for main purpose, I would just focus on like what happened in the simplest terms. And what happened in the simplest terms was some guy got surprised that, I was about to say something inappropriate, that this foolish, conceited man was a famous guy. Something along those lines is what I'm thinking. So that'll be my prediction there. All right, now I'm going to eliminate answers that don't match that prediction. A, portrays the thoughts of a character who's embarrassed about his own behavior. No. It presents an account of a misunderstanding. Surprised that this guy was famous. That's a misunderstanding. I'll keep B. Offers a short history of how a person came to be famous. No. Explains why one character disliked another. Tempting. Like, this definitely happens, but is that the main purpose? I think because it ends with Humphrey Davy, and also because they give us this information about Humphrey Davy, it's probably more important that we have this the surprise. And also, the explanation of why he dislikes him is pretty brief. It seems like he's kind of jealous of him, so I don't think that's going to be our answer. So choice B is going to be our answer. All right, here we've got main purpose of the text. So I am going to just read through the whole thing and come up with a prediction for that. Studying late 19th and early 20th century artifacts from an agricultural and domestic site in Texas, this archaeologist found that Black women employed as farm workers utilized hook and eye closures to fasten their clothes at the waist, giving themselves a silhouette similar to the one that was popular in contemporary fashion and typically achieved through more restrictive garments such as corsets. All right, let me just unpack this for myself. So basically we're seeing these Black women made clothes to look like popular fashion. It's kind of how I would simplify things. And then Fluellen, that's the archaeologist. The archaeologist argues that this sartorial practice shows that these women balanced hegemonic ideals of femininity with the requirements of their physically demanding occupation. All right, and then to kind of put that into my own words, I would say something like, well, it talks about ideals of femininity. So I could say to stay feminine, even though working, something like that, demanding occupation. So even though working hard. So that's kind of my summary of what's actually being said in the passage. As far as purpose goes, purpose is usually like, what is the text doing? So I would say the text is giving us evidence that these women were doing this, more or less. So I'll kind of just use that as my prediction. A, to describe an unexpected discovery. Not really an unexpected discovery. It's more like I said, just explaining to us that this is what we think was going on. To discuss research investigated in the ways the Black female farm workers used fashion to resist traditional gender ideals. So they were trying to actually fall in line with gender ideals, like to stay feminine. So that's the opposite of what we said. To evaluate a scholarly work that offers explanations for the impact of urban fashion ideals on Black female farm workers. No, it's not evaluating the work and offering explanations for the impact of urban fashion ideals. It's just kind of saying that they were trying to still stick with those fashion ideals, but I don't know if that's so much an impact. I don't know. I'm going to keep that one because it kind of works. D, to summarize the findings of a study that explored factors influencing a fashion practice among Black female farm workers. See, I like that a lot better because it is summarizing the findings, basically that they were doing this thing to stick with the fashion that explored factors influencing a fashion practice. Because the focus was more on them doing this fashion practice rather than the impact that fashion ideals had on them. So D is going to be my answer for this one. All right, I can tell from the question stem this is going to be a detailed question. Anytime we see something like, what does the text most strongly suggest? And then something specific. So I'm going to be looking for the use of this thing's performance space specifically as I read through this, because it's not about a main idea. It's more about the performance space. So the most recent iteration of this immersive experience, and then we have some non-essential info, transforms its performance space. Okay, so here I want to really pay attention, even though this is non-essential information, because we're starting to describe the performance space. I want to make sure I read everything. 5-story warehouse into a 1930s era hotel. Audience members who wander through the labyrinthine venue at their own pace and follow the actors as they play out simultaneous interweaving narrative loops confront the impossibility of experiencing the production in its entirety. Okay, so for the performance space, basically we're getting play taking place, I think it's a play, all over warehouse. So just kind of putting things into my own words. The play's refusal of narrative coherence thus hinges on the sense of spatial fragmentation, hinges on the sense of spatial fragmentation. So that's basically a fancy way of saying it relies on this 5-story warehouse that the venue's immense and intricate layout generates. So what does it suggest? I mean, I guess it suggests that the performance space is like part of the play itself. So I'll say something like part of the play itself. Part of your play. And let's eliminate. The choice of this venue likely enabled the play's creators to experiment with the use of space in a way that venue from earlier productions. This is a big red flag. Doesn't mention any earlier productions in the text, so that is an easy no. Audience members likely find the experience disappointing. No, we're not worried about that. Again, I'm looking for like the performance space being part of the play itself. The production's dependence on a particular environment would likely make it difficult to reproduce exactly in a different space. Yeah, if it's part of the play itself, it would be difficult to produce somewhere else. So I'm going to keep that one. Audience members who navigate this space to a recommended itinerary will likely have a better grasp of the narrative than audience members who depart from the itinerary. I mean, maybe, but there's no mention of an itinerary anywhere. So again, that would be like outside of the text. We don't care about that. And it doesn't go with what I said. So choice C is my answer here. All right, I'm going to start with this view so that you can pause the video and try this on your own first. But for these, if you know me, you know I usually actually don't like to look at the graph at first. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in as I work through this. And basically, I'll look at the visual aid if I need to look at the visual aid. But let's see. We want to complete the text, which basically means we want to support the conclusion or the hypothesis or whatever. Indeed, it's a conclusion. They concluded that REM sleep may not be homeostatically regulated. Okay, so REM sleep may not be homeostatically regulated in fur seals. And then it says citing as evidence that, so again, if we're completing the text, we're giving evidence to support that conclusion. Now, I have no idea what homeostatically regulated means, so I'm going to glance through the passage and look for it. And indeed, right here in the first sentence, it says, homeostatically regulated, animals compensate for periods of REM sleep deprivation by increasing subsequent REM sleep. So in my own words, that would be something like make up for lost REM sleep later, right? So that's what the regulation means. So now as I go through my answers, I want to support the idea that fur seals do not do this. They are not regulated. They do not make up for lost REM sleep later, all right? And I'm going to see if I can get away with just eliminating answers, but again, I'll look at the graph or whatever if I need to. Okay, so the seals in the study didn't show significantly less REM sleep during the second day after returning to land than they did the first day. So real quick, I want to make sure that I understand what happened the first day and the second day. I'm going to assume that they lost sleep the first day. Again, if I go back to the paragraph, when on land, fur seals get enough REM sleep, but during the weeks they're in the water, they get almost none. And then it says in the study, they recorded it, once they had returned to land. So indeed, this is a study right after they came back from the water where they weren't getting sleep. So if they showed less REM sleep during the second day after returning to land, that's just comparing 2 days on land, which doesn't help us at all. We're basically looking for them making up for lost sleep after they get back. So that's not even connected. So A is out. B showed no significant differences from one another in baseline levels of REM sleep. That doesn't mention the water versus the land at all. It's just talking about them compared to each other. So that doesn't work either. Didn't consistently demonstrate a significant increase in REM sleep after their period of deprivation in the water. That's specifically talking about after deprivation in the water, didn't increase REM sleep, didn't make up for lost REM sleep. So that's looking really strong. Let's look at choice D, because sometimes you'll get two answers that work and then you have to look at the graph. Showed no significant difference between REM sleep after returning to land and REM sleep while in the water. So that one's kind of tricky because no significant difference would not necessarily be making up for lost REM sleep, but it's not specifically talking about, not making up for lost REM sleep after returning. It's just saying that there was no significant difference. So it kind of works, but it is not as strong. So D would be out, and my answer would be choice C. All right, we got an inferences question here. So for these, I like to kind of work backwards. Young and colleagues' recommendation therefore implies that HST, because this is kind of acting as the question stem for a lot of other types of reading questions where it's going to tell me what I'm aiming for as I read through the rest of the passage. So it therefore implies that something about HST. So as we read through the rest of this, just know that we're aiming for some sort of implication about whatever HST is. All right, so HST is projected to maintain operation until at least 2030, but it has already revolutionized this imaging system, this image of solar system bodies this seems like it's probably detail I don't need to worry about. Notwithstanding, this is going to be a transition, and I get excited about transitions because they kind of point to things I should pay attention to, that only about 6% of the bodies are within the solar system. Okay, so it's basically it's saying HST has done important stuff, although this only includes 6% of bodies that are within solar system. So I'm focusing on that. And then we get this researcher and colleagues assert, so they're making some sort of an argument that a new space telescope dedicated exclusively to solar system observations would permit an extensive survey of minor solar system bodies and the long UV observation to discern how solar system bodies can change over time. Okay, so basically they're saying if we get a new telescope that's dedicated exclusively to solar system observations. Because remember, the HST is only doing about 6%, would permit an extensive survey of this. The recommendation therefore implies that HST blank. So the implication to me would be if we have a telescope that's exclusively looking at solar system bodies, then the HST could focus on things outside of the solar system since it was only doing about 6% anyway. And now we have this other telescope that's dedicated to it. We could basically have the HST for outside of the solar system and then this new one for inside the solar system. So I'm going to say can focus outside solar system. All right, let's take a look. Will likely continue to be used primarily to observe objects outside the solar system. Well, I usually like to eliminate, but that is such a close match. I'm just going to go ahead and circle A. That's my answer, and we'll move on. All right, got another inference here. And normally I like to start with the last sentence, but it's already looking pretty long, and I can see it's kind of mentioning stuff that I'm going to need to know about. So I'm just going to start from the beginning here and try to wrap my head around what's going on from the start. The one thing I will note is that suggesting that during the Bourbon Restoration. So basically we want to make some sort of a suggestion about what was happening during the Bourbon Restoration. During the Bourbon Restoration, the right to vote required that in part a person paid at least 300 francs in direct taxes to the government. Okay, so to vote must pay. I'll say something like that. And it says the four most common taxes were levied on real estate, the doors and windows of taxpayer homes, the rental values of homes, and the businesses of artisans and merchants. Okay, so basically, this was mostly affecting real estate. Although relatively few people paid the tax on real estate, it was the main means of voter qualification and accounted for over 2/3 of government receipts during this period. Okay, so if it was the main means of voter qualification, I would say maybe we could infer that people with real estate were voting more during this period because you had to pay this thing in order to vote. So we'll say people with real estate voted more. That'll be my prediction. Those people who had the right to vote most likely had substantial holdings in French real estate. That's literally what I said, but this one is kind of scary, so I'm going to make sure and eliminate the other answers. Voting habits of French artisans and merchants were effective in reducing tax burdens? No. Number of doors and windows was kept to a minimum? No. French people with significant foreign investments were unlikely to have the right to vote? No. So choice A is definitely going to be my answer. Cool. That ended up being a little bit easier than I thought. All right, we've got cross-text connections here. So we're usually going to have one text responding to the other, but in this case, we have a little bit of an oddball. It says, what would the two texts most likely agree with? So I'm actually just going to read through these, kind of get myself a main idea for both of them and try to find a connection between the two where they agree with each other. So text 1, this guy disputed claims that the two noble kinsmen was co-authored by Shakespeare and this guy Fletcher. He felt Fletcher's contributions were obvious. Fletcher had a distinct style in his other plays, so much so that the lines with that style were considered sufficient evidence of his authorship. But for the lines not deemed to be by Fletcher, this guy felt their depiction of women indicated that their author was not Shakespeare, but Philip Massinger. All right. So basically, I'm seeing the argument is that the two noble kinsmen, I'll just call it TNK, not by, we'll say Shakespeare S and F, so Shakespeare and Fletcher, but by F and M, M being Philip Massinger. That's kind of like the main thing that I'm seeing there. Looking at number 2, scholars have accepted that TNK was co-authored by Shakespeare. since the 70s, it appears in all major one-volume editions of Shakespeare's complete works. Though scholars disagree about who wrote what exactly, it is generally held on the basis of style. Shakespeare wrote all the first act and most of the last, while John Fletcher authored most of the 3 middle acts. Okay, so this guy is saying T&K was authored by S&F. Now, as far as what they have in common, it looks like they both agree on the F, like they both think Fletcher was involved. So that'll be my prediction. They would agree that Fletcher was involved. All right, let's take a look here. John Fletcher's writing has a unique, readily identifiable style. So that's not exactly what I wrote, but I do remember we see like on the basis of style, Fletcher had a distinct style. So that's literally mentioned in both texts, so I'll keep that. B, the women characters in Fletcher's plays are similar to women in Massinger's plays. No, that mentions Fletcher, but Massinger was only mentioned in the first passage, so B is out. C, T&K belongs in one volume. That doesn't mention Fletcher at all. D, Massinger. Again, Massinger was only mentioned in passage 1, so gotta be A. All right, we've got standard conventions of English, specifically punctuation. So I'm just going to start from the main sentence. With this novel data set, the team was able to determine how current-driven mixing varies across regions and what impact it has on the distribution of heats. Okay, we have 2 noun phrases, not 2 independent clauses, so we don't need any punctuation. My answer is choice D. And if what I just said doesn't make sense to you, you might want to go ahead and take a look at my punctuation and grammar course, which will teach you how to solve these just as quickly as I solved that one. Link in the description. All right, another boundaries question. So I'll start just from, actually, the whole thing is one big sentence. So I guess I'll start from the beginning. This researcher developed a process for increasing tensile strength measured in or GPA of silkworm silk by dissolving and reweaving the silk in a solution of iron metals, this and this. Z, increase the amount of force required to stretch it from approximately 0.5 to 2. So for ones like this that I think are even more challenging, I want to pay attention to whether or not I have independent clauses. So let's start by seeing if I could end the sentence after silk, since I see D as an option. Researcher developed a process for doing this thing of silkworm silk. This is non-essential information, so I could ignore it. This person developed a process for increasing the tensile strength of silkworm silk, period. That would work. Do I have an independent clause starting here? Dissolving and reweaving the silk in a solution of these things. Z, increase the amount of force required to stretch it from this to this. That's also a full sentence. So yeah, my answer is D. Got a form, structure, and sense, aka a grammar question here. I like to at least start with the sentence with the blank space and then read more if I need to. The animal which lays eggs but also nurses blank young with milk has since been classified as whatever. Okay. And it looks like I'm dealing with pronouns. So really I just need to figure out what is my antecedent. Well, my antecedent is the animal. The animal lays eggs, but also nurses its young with milk. It is singular because the animal is singular, and D means it is, so my answer is choice C here. All right, more grammar here. I'm just gonna read the whole thing because it's incredibly short. Known as Earth's living skin, biocrests are thin layers of soil held together by surface-dwelling microorganisms, such as fungi, lichens, and whatever. Fortifying soil and arid ecosystems against erosion, comma. All right, so that's structure where we end with a comma, and then also in all the answer choices, we have different starting noun phrases. That means we're dealing with modifiers. So I just need to figure out what or who is fortifying soil. A recent study's estimate. An estimate cannot fortify soil. A is out. An estimated 60% reduction. A reduction in something cannot fortify soil. So B is out. These crusts. These crusts are a thing, so they might be able to fortify soil. I'll hold on, and then maybe we'll debate between this one and D. A recent study. Oh, or not. A study can't fortify soil. So even though I have no idea like exactly what's going on here, it's very scientific, I can tell pretty easily that 3 of these things cannot fortify soil, while one of them potentially could, and that's going to be my answer, choice C. We've got a transitions question here. In a heated debate in biogeography, the field is divided between dispersalists and vicariancists. Blank, there are those who argue that dispersal is this thing, and those who insist that vicariance is. Okay, so it seems like we get this vague statement about the dispersalists versus the vicariancists. I don't know what that means, but it seems like they're sort of explaining to us what that means. Again, the language here, it seems very scientific, but basically it's like an explanation of what these things are. So I'm looking for some sort of a clarifying transition, like that is to say, would be my prediction here. And then normally I would start eliminating, but I see that is, which is literally the same thing as that is to say. It's just a shortened version. So my answer is D. We've got rhetorical synthesis. So I'm going to start by ignoring the notes, and then I'm going to look for the goal. The goal is to explain the disadvantage of relying on audio features to predict a song's popularity. And let's eliminate anything that doesn't match that goal. Many popular predicting algorithms are based on a song's audio features. That's just telling me what they're based on. I don't see a disadvantage there. Algorithms based on audio features may misidentify main features with varying acoustic traits, making such algorithms less reliable predictors. That is explaining a disadvantage. I'll keep it. Audio features describe acoustic traits such as pitch intervals, which may vary, whereas descriptive, this is giving me different explanations for audio features versus descriptive tags. I don't care about that. The MSD's descriptive tags are reliable predictors. Again, it doesn't tell me a disadvantage of relying on audio features. So pretty quickly, pretty easily, my answer is B. So we're about to do our hard math questions, but I just want to let you know real quick that there's actually a bonus video with 20 additional hard questions, 10 in English, 10 in math, that I'm making available to my Fancy Pants students. So go ahead and use the link in the description to join and become a member, or you can just click that little button that says join. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the math. And remember to pause the video and try each of these on your own first. I go really quickly through these math questions. Looks like we've got a linear problem here. It's talking about a line. So what does it tell us about this line? Intersects the y-axis at point 0, -6, so it's giving us the y-intercept, and it passes through the point 2, 2. It's also saying the point 20w lies on the line. So what can we do here? I would go ahead and figure out what the equation is for this line. That should make things easy, right? So we know that it's y equals mx plus b, and then b is our y-intercept. They tell us our y-intercept is -6, so mx minus 6. And then we can plug in 0.22 to figure out what our slope is. So 2 equals m times 2 minus 6. That means that if we add 6 to both sides, we get that 8 equals 2m. So basically our slope is going to be 4 after we divide by 2. So m equals 4. So now we can revise our equation here. Instead of y equals mx minus 6, we can say y equals 4x minus 6. And then from here, we just have to plug in 20 for x, because we have 20w, right? So y equals 4 times 20 minus 6. 4 times 20 is 80. 80 minus 6 is 76, or 74, I should say. So my answer is 74. All right, we've got a function here. Looking at it, looks like it's a linear function, because we basically have y equals mx plus b. It's just the mx situation is a little bit weird, but it seems to be a linear function. Okay, what's it asking me? If a temperature increased by 9.10 kelvins, how much did the temperature increase in Fahrenheit? Well, let's think about this. So we could just plug in 9.10 for X here, but like I said, it's kind of weird looking, and I'm not super into that because it's asking about temperature increase, which should just be based on our slope, not our y-intercept. So first, I want to FOIL this out so that we don't have this weird looking linear equation, so that it actually looks like a normal linear equation and we actually know what our slope is. So basically, if we FOIL this out, we get f of x equals 9 over 5x minus 9 over 5 times 273.15 plus 32. And let me just separate here. Over here, we have our y-intercept, which I don't care about because a y-intercept in the context of a word problem is always going to be our starting point. So as far as the actual increase goes, the actual slope, we just have 9 over 5x. So to get our answer, all we have to do is 9 over 5 times 9.10. And just to be safe, I'll throw this into Desmos real quick. But basically we get 9 over 5 times 9.1, and that's 16.38, which is choice A. Looking at the answer choices here, we've got linear equations because all of these are going to be linear, as you should be able to tell. And really it's just asking us which equation is going to match up with the scenario. So we're trying to figure out, it looks like, what our y-intercept is going to be and also what our slope is going to be, since those are the two things that we see at play here. Let's start with slope because that should be pretty easy. We basically want rise over run. And here it says gasoline is $4 per gallon, $4 per gallon. And if we're talking about how many miles he should drive, instead of thinking about gallons, we need to think about miles. So the second sentence here says 25 miles per gallon of gasoline. So our slope should be 4 over 25. And we can get rid of A and B because of that. And if we're trying to reduce his weekly expenditure by $5 by driving a certain number of miles, if this is going to help us to determine the number of miles, because it does say M is miles, right? That should be equal to only 5, 5 being $5, because we're trying to figure out how many of those miles equals that $5. So that is actually choice D. Okay, so we've got a geometry question here, and this is asking about the volume of some sort of container. I do like to start with the main question so I kind of know what I'm focusing on, but let's take a look and see what this container is. It's a right cylindrical container. Okay, so basically it's like a soda can with a height that is 4 inches longer than the radius. So let's think about this. Volume of any regular cylindrical container is going to be basically the area of a circle times height. So it'd be pi r squared times height. And it says the height is 4 inches longer than the radius. So basically we just want to express that. So we could write it, and I'm not going to look at the answers yet. I'm going to change it so that it makes sense for me. If the height is 4 inches longer than the radius, it could be like volume equals pi r squared times, instead of height, we would have r plus 4, right? Because we're going to take our radius, we're going to add 4 to it to get our height. So I'm looking for that answer more or less. And none of my answers actually look like this. So let's unpack it and actually distribute what's in parentheses. So we would get r squared times r is pi r to the third. And then if we multiply by 4, it'd be plus 4 pi r squared. So again, I'm taking this and I'm distributing it to what's in parentheses here. And then that actually lines up with answer D. So my answer is D. All right. It's looking from the wording like we have a system of equations here. And the reason I'm saying system of equations is we have two different types of something. Whenever you see two different types of something, That's usually a pretty big indicator that you're dealing with systems of equations. More specifically, if you have two types of something with different values, so in this case, tickets with values of either 12 or 8, and then you have another total, which is like the total number of items, right? So we have total number of tickets plus the total price. That indicator that we're dealing with systems of equations. Anyway, let's set this up. So I'm going to say x plus y, that is kid tickets and adult tickets, equals total tickets, which is 30. And then for price, I'm going to have 12x price plus 8y equals 300, because it says we have $300 in total. And then how much in dollars was spent on adult tickets? So from here, you could definitely use substitution or elimination. I would prefer to just throw it into Desmos at this point. So I'm going to open up Desmos real quick and plug in my two equations, x plus y equals 30 and 12x plus 8y equals 300. Looks like I'm going to need to zoom out, so I'll zoom out, and then my intersect is going to give me my x and y values, x being adult and y being kid. Looks like they're the same. So regardless, my answer is going to be 15. We just have to be careful, though, because it's not asking us how many adult tickets were sold. It's asking us how much in dollars was spent on adult tickets. So if we know that there were 15 adult tickets, but each adult ticket is $12, then it would actually be 15 times 12, which would be 150 plus 30. So it would be 180 as my answer. All right, we've got systems of equations here, and from the answer choices, it looks like some pretty complicated systems of equations, right? Usually when you see radical signs, it's an indication that you're going to have to end up using the quadratic equation, but I would rather just solve this using Desmos. So I'm going to pull up Desmos. I'm going to put both equations into Desmos as my first step here. So x minus y equals 1, and then we had x plus y equals x squared minus 3. So let's take a look at our solutions here. We've got 2.732, 1.732, or negative 0.732, negative 1.732. But more importantly, we need to match these up with actual answers. So let me squeeze this down a bit to give us some room here so we can see. Our first answer, we have 1 plus the square root of 3 and the square root of 3. So if I just know what the square root of 3 is in decimal form, that should help. SQRT is a little shortcut, by the way. Square root of 3 is 1.732. That's familiar, right? That was our intercept over here, 1.732. So that would match up. Now we just have to make sure that the x value matches up. Well, if we add 1 to it, 1 plus the square root of 3, that would indeed be 2.732. So we got lucky. Our answer is going to be choice A. But if that didn't work, we would just go down the line testing our answers till we find one that works. Next question is looking like we have a quadratic. This is factored form of a quadratic, right? And it's saying, which of the following intervals contains the x-coordinate of the vertex of the graph F? Now, from factored form, if it's asking about the x-coordinate of the vertex, there's actually a couple of cool tricks. If it were in standard form, that would be negative b over 2a. But since we're in factored form, it's actually just the average of the intercepts. So if we have x plus 3 and x plus 1, that means x equals negative 3 and x equals negative 1. Average of those two would be negative 3 minus 1 over 2, which is negative 2. So the x-coordinate of our vertex is negative 2. That means that the x-coordinate is going to be greater than negative 3, so not A. It's going to be greater than negative 3 and less than 1. That's true. And then the other ones, they're not negative, so our answer is B. This question is something I like to refer to as just like interpreting a quadratic equation, because it gives us a quadratic equation, right? And then it's asking us what A represents. Well, what the heck is A? It says the graph intersects the x-axis at 0 and A. So basically we know that A is going to be the bigger x-intercept, And there's somebody doing something in the yard outside. Sorry if you guys can hear that. I'll try to cut it out with my magic editing skills. But anyway, well, let's think about what an x-intercept is. So visually, we do have an upside down parabola because it's A is negative here. So if we have something like this, then our x-intercepts are both going to be when the price is $0, right? $0, $0. So at some point, it seems like if we sell too many products, instead of making a profit, we're actually going to make $0. So I'm looking for something about selling too many products, making $0. That's what A would represent. So choice A, the revenue when the unit price of the product is 0. So it shouldn't be that the price is 0, because remember, X is the price, and we can see that X is not 0, Y is 0, so A is not going to work. B, the unit price of the product that will result in maximum revenue. No, I would say $0 in revenue is not maximum revenue. That would actually be up here. That would be our vertex. C, the unit price in dollars of the product that will result in a revenue of 0. Yes, this will result in a revenue of 0, and just like this will result in a revenue of 0. And sorry, to be clear, I think a second ago I said that X is how many we're selling. It's not how many we're selling, it's the unit price. So basically, if we price it too low, we're not making any money. And if we price it too high, we're not making any money. But yeah, C would work. So C is going to be our answer here. We've got a measures of central tendency question here. I know because I see different measures of central tendency in the answer choices. And it's asking, which of the following measures does not have the same value in both original and new data sets? All right, so let's take a look at what's happening and see if we can figure this out. It says we've got a data set of 27 numbers that has a mean of 33 and a median of 33. So this is telling me basically that these numbers are split up evenly. If you have the same median as you have mean, it means there's the same distance on average between the values. A new data set is created by adding 7 to each number from in the original data set that is greater than the median, and subtracting 7 from each number in the original data set that is less than the median. Let's demonstrate this by using a really small data set. Let's pretend that we have, we'll say 8, 9, 10. So the mean of this is going to be 9, and the median of this is going to be 9 because they're spaced evenly. We have 1 between each number. That's the rule that I was just mentioning. Now it's saying we're going to subtract 7 from each number less than the median and add 7 to each number over the median. So if we did that, our new data set would be 1, 9, and 17, right? Because they're still evenly spaced, because there's now 8 between them, the mean and the median are still going to be 9. So we know that those things would not be affected. So mean and median stays the same. The sum of the numbers is also going to stay the same because we subtract 8 and we add 8. That cancels out. So by process of elimination, it's going to have to be the standard deviation. And indeed, in a nutshell, standard deviation is basically like, on average, how far away from the mean are all of the numbers. We've got a percentage question here. It says percent increase. So I'm going to be using my percent change formula. And it says the manager estimated the percent increase from 2012 to 2013 would double. So basically this percentage increase that we can see here would double the increase from 2013 to 2014, which would be an increase that we can't see. How many subscriptions did the manager expect would be sold in 2014? All right, So let's start by finding the percentage increase here. So we'll use our percent change formula, which is the difference between the original and the new. Looking here, we can see that the difference would be 280 divided by the original number. The original number would be the first number, 5,600. We could get rid of a zero, get rid of a zero. If you know that 28 is half of 56, we basically have 0.5. But then we have to add the extra zero because we have an extra zero here. So it'd be 0.05. So that would be a 5% increase. And it says that that was double the percent increase that from 2013 to 2014. So then if we estimate that, we would have 2013, 5880. And now to increase half of 5%, so we would multiply by 1 for our original 100% plus 0.025. And that is something I don't want to do in my head, so I'm going to throw that into Desmos. 5880 times 1.025, and that is 6,027, which is choice B, which is our answer. All right, so this one I think is very tricky because it used to be that you could just read the last sentence for probability questions and kind of go from there. So if we read the last question, it says, if a person who preferred a picnic, so we know we're looking at this picnic zone, is selected at random, what's the probability that person responded by email? Right? And hopefully if you look at the chart and you see that it's percentages, it'll kind of solidify that things are a little bit off. Like we don't have all the information we need just from the chart here, which is normally the case. So if we kind of skim through the passage, we see a really important detail that we need to know, which is for the survey, second to last sentence, for the survey, the number of email responses was twice the number of phone responses. So I like to just basically think, we'll say like phone had 100 responses, email had 200 responses. So basically the whole email side would get doubled. So our desired, instead of being 5, we're going to say is 10. And then our total would be the 10 plus the 20, which is 30. So then our probability is 10 out of 30 or 1 out of 3. Up next, we've got sort of a ratio question. It's asking us, to the nearest hundredth of a meter, what is the length of one edge of this sample? So we know we're looking for an edge. What are we looking at an edge of? The density of a certain type of wood is 353 kilograms per cubic meter. Okay, so we're looking at the edge of a cube, it seems. And let me just write that ratio down. It's 353 kilograms per cubic meter. We'll call that like m to the third. That's our ratio. A sample of this type of wood is the shape of a cube and has a mass of 345 kilograms. So we have a sample that is 345 kilograms. Let's first figure out how many, because this is 1 over here. Let's figure out how many cubic meters we have in the sample. So we'll cross multiply. 345 times 1 is 345. Then basically 353x. So we will divide both sides by 353. And I'll pull up Desmos to make my life easier here. So again, those numbers were basically 345 divided by 353. So we have 0.977, which is basically 0.98, but we have to be careful because 0.98 is one of our answers. But remember, it's not asking us how many cubic meters we have. It's asking us the length of one edge of this sample. So we would actually need to cube root our answer here. So it'd be like the cube root of 0.98 is going to be what we're looking for, because a cube is basically length times width times height. So one edge would be either the length, the width, or the height. So then if we throw that into Desmos, basically we could just take what we already have and cube root it. And that was just CBRT, by the way. 345 divided by 353. Probably get rid of that. And now we see it's actually 0.99, which is choice B. So be really careful about wording because they will always have wrong answers that line up with missing a step, right? So this question here is going to be about evaluating statistical claims. It is saying which of the following statements must be true. And basically, we just want to kind of read through the scenario and then eliminate anything that might not be true. So here it says, to determine the mean number of children per household in a community, Tabitha surveyed 20 families at a playground. For the 20 families surveyed, the mean number of children per household was 2.4. All right, so we have our full understanding here, right? Choice A, the mean number of children per household in the community is 2.4. That's not going to work because whenever we take a sample, it does not mean that we get the actual statistics on the population that we're sampling. We would never be able to say is. Furthermore, 20 families is a really small sample size, and it's also only families at a playground. So big issue there with saying in the community. It would have to be something more like who go to the playground in the community, and probably just a bigger sample size than 20 families. B, a determination about the mean number of children per household in the community should not be made because the sample size is too small. So in general, 20 is a very small sample size, like I just mentioned. That said, we don't know how many people are in the community. So that one, I don't think has to be true because it says must be true. It might be true. I think it's true. But because we don't know how many people are in the community, we can't really determine if it's too small. So we'll get rid of B. C, the sampling method is flawed and may produce a biased estimate of the mean number of children per household. Yeah, that's what I was saying when I said they're only serving families at a playground. It's not random. So C is definitely going to work, and that's going to be my answer. But if we wanted to be safe, we get rid of D. D, the sampling method is not flawed. No, we know it is flawed, right? So our answer is choice C here. All right, we got a SOH-CAH-TOA question here. It's asking about sine of x. So in SOH-CAH-TOA is OH, that's opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite x is 16, divided by the hypotenuse, which is 23. So my answer is 16 over 23. All right, so we've got a circle graphing question here. And the way that it's written, I can tell that we basically want to stick this into the normal version of the equation, which would be like x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And this isn't a huge deal. We basically just have to break this down, complete the square, so on and so forth. But it's going to take a minute. So I would probably just throw this into Desmos because I think it's going to be a little bit faster. So if we pull up Desmos, we'll throw it in. It was 2x squared minus 6x plus 2y squared plus 2y equals 45. We're trying to find the radius. So basically, we find the difference between the top and the bottom. That's going to give us our diameter. So we have y is 4.5. Y is negative 5.5. So the difference between those would be 4.5 minus negative 5.5. So basically 10. Half of 10 is 5. My radius is 5. My answer is 5. See how that's a lot faster? Power of Desmos, baby. I'm actually pretty curious how you did, so let me know in the comments below if you were able to get most of those questions right, or if there are certain question types that you still need to work on. And if you're looking to get some more study practice in, YouTube thinks that this video here is going to be the best recommendation for you, so go ahead and check it out.